Councillors, just before we go, we're just about to go live stream. We're going to do a quick practice run to make sure we're all looking pretty good on live stream. And testing the volume, 1, 2, 3, testing, and... Okay, thank you, councillors. We are now live. It's my pleasure to declare the ordinary meeting, Blayney Shire Council for March open, and thank you all very much for your attendance. In opening this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. Councillors, just for information and for members of the public, this meeting is being live streamed and you may be recorded as part of these proceedings. Apologies for non-attendance, I believe are all here, Madam GM, very good. Disclosures of interest, Madam GM, do we have any disclosures of interest for the business here this evening?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we have a number of disclosures of interest. The first one is from yourself, Councillor Ferguson. It is the request for interest-free loan, the Doctor's Incentive Package. It is item number 8 on page 29. The reason for the interest is that you are related to the applicant and it is a pecuniary interest. The next one, Mr Mayor, is from Councillor Somervale, and the report is the minutes of the Financial Assistance Committee meeting. It is item number 11 on page 42. The reason for the interest, as per the declarations of interest in the minutes of the Financial Assistance Committee meeting held 3rd of March 2022, Councillor Somervale is a member of the Blayney Rotary Club who assists the RYDA program and a member of the Blayney Golf Club. It is a non-pecuniary interest and less than significant. The next declaration of interest, Mr Mayor, is from Councillor Price-Jones. The report title is the Country Education Foundation, being item number 13 on page number 50. The reason for the interest is that Councillor Price-Jones is on the executive. It is a non-pecuniary interest, less than significant. And the last one, Mr Mayor, is again from yourself, Councillor Ferguson. The report title is DA 2021-35, the 15-lot subdivision on 238 Forest Reese Road, Millthorpe. It is item number 24 on page number 112, and the reason for this interest is that you are related to the applicant and it is a non-pecuniary significant interest.
Thank you very much, Madam GM. Councillors, we do have a public forum, but before we go into that, I'd just like to recognise that tonight we do have some very wonderful guests here in the Second Orient Venturers group, who as part of their civic duties learning have come along here tonight, so we have to behave ourselves, show them how a good council runs, and I'm sure they'll get a bit out about the process of how local government works, because this is pretty much what every council across New South Wales does. Okay, councillors, moving on now to our public forum, we do have 2 speakers. First of all, I'd like to introduce Ian McRae. If you'd like to come up to the microphone, Ian. Ian's going to talk about roadside weed control. Ian, you have about 5 minutes and I'll let you know when you're getting close to the end.
Thanks
Ian.
Thanks for this opportunity. I'm Ian McRae, Rockville Farm, Bentley's Lane, about 5k east of Millthorpe. I would like to inform Council that in the Blayney Shire, Blackberry and St John's Ward they're both major weeds and they're both out of control along many of our lanes, roads, and virtually all of those lanes and roads within the Shire. Told the importance of roadside habitat in some of Council's propaganda. Well, this habitat is under serious threat. The current system of roadside spraying by the Upper Macquarie County Council, which is funded by the Shire, is clearly not working. It is grossly underfunded. Many lanes have not been sprayed for years, and I mean 5 or 6 years. So this is gross negligence. In many cases, weeds are spreading into neighbouring farmland. Many farmers are now resorting to doing their own spraying on the roadside. So most farmers spray the roadside boundary every year because you know there are weeds there, but now they're going onto the road because it's not being done. This problem is becoming critical as every year that a lane or road is not sprayed, there'll be twice as many weeds in area and volume, maybe more, the next year. That's going to take twice the labour, twice the incrementally use of spray until control is achieved. And I don't believe total control is achievable because there's so much long grass on the side of the roads. But at least we need general control. One spray, which is the current policy, is never enough. As a farmer, you know that if you've got a patch of weeds, you've got to spray every year for 3 years, if not more. So to achieve this control, the funding and the strategic management is seriously lacking, both from Council and from the Upper Macquarie County Council, although they have people who are trying to do their best, but the funding is a problem. But that's it. So general control is possible with annual spraying, and it has to be annual spraying, of every lane and every road necessary. I would like to thank Rebecca Ryan for her description in the local paper on how Upper Macquarie Council is funded. And I would like to thank Councillor Reynolds for his tireless work with the Upper Macquarie County Council and in recent with his trying to get it receive more funding. So he's at them, but what can they do without funding? So this problem's ongoing. It's not fair that farmers who per head pay higher rates than the townies do not get an effective service. In my opinion, roadside weed spraying is more important than keeping the town parks and side parks and whatever looking like bowling greens. Do we want to have Adelaide Street looking great and the back of a lot of the buildings being rusty? Do we have the town looking pretty good and the back of the Shire looking bloody awful? Farming is becoming more important. In fact, it's being promoted now as our next big industry of 100 billion.
1 minute left. 1 minute.
Thank you. I regard this issue as more important than mowing parks, tourism propaganda, allowing endless developments of hobby farms and subdivisions. There is on Council's part a duty of care to fund a full range of activities, and this is one of them. If Adelaide Street was infested with blackberry bushes and St John's wort, if the streets of Blayney were infested with blackberries, there would be uproar. If there were rabbit warrens in the streets of Blayney and in Adelaide Street, there would be uproar. That's how we feel. It's our street. So we're pissed off. I know Council has limited money and basically you're all trying to do your best, but priority. As a farmer, my rates have increased on average 5% every year for the past 10 years. So this talk of minimal rate rises, when you live near a town like Millthorpe and your land valuations are going up and up and up, that's a load of garbage. So,
Conclusion, Ian?
that's about it. I just hope I haven't fallen on deaf ears, and like it's a duty of care for every one of you, everyone on council, to reconsider the importance of this issue. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. There's no doubt, and thank you for bringing these matters to our attention, even though we certainly are aware of it, and it is a serious concern, not only here, but right across the region. But I can assure you that we do take it seriously, and we will be trying our best to make sure that we can fund roadside spraying. And happy to report back to you later on. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks very much.
Okay, councillors, we do have another public forum before we commence our meeting. It happens to be an item that I've declared an interest in, so I might just ask the Deputy Mayor if he could do the 5-minute timer for me in regards to the public forum. And I'll invite the applicant, Rosemary Amos, to the lectern. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Let it be noted that the Mayor, having declared an interest, has left the chamber. Rosemary, 5 minutes. Over to you.
It'll only take about one, but anyway. Good evening all. I'm here on behalf of Peter and myself regarding the subdivision of our property 238 Forest Reefs Road, Millthorpe, which is on the agenda tonight for approval. We're objecting to the Council's recommended condition number 2, which requires us to provide a 94-metre length of road reserve, 20 metres wide, to our neighbour's boundary at 280 Forest Reefs Road. Just to give you a bit of history, we bought our property in 1987. It was part of Woodlands, which was across the road, and then it had been subdivided off. At the time, there were no subdivisions on this road all the way to Forest Reefs. Over the past 35 years, we have watched 10 subdivisions being approved and developed around us. This included the Banham property was cut into 3 ways: Clover Ridge 2, Booth Grove 2, Woodlands 2, 2 more approvals for 271 Forest Reefs Road, 1 at 568 Forest Reefs Road, and 1 along Carcoar Road, which are all within 2 kilometres of our property. There were several more on the way to Forest Reefs, including Mayville, which has recently been approved and is at the end of the zoning for large residential subdivision. In 2019, we were approached by 3 agents wanting to buy our property so their clients could subdivide Warrawilla and have access to Forest Reefs Road through our property. We did not want to have a thoroughfare through our place, so we decided to plan our own subdivision with the road in the middle, so a connection could not be made by any of our 4 neighbours. After seeing some of the subdivision around us, we just want to have a quiet, no-through road with a cul-de-sac at the end and plenty of space surrounding each block, so the houses will not be built on top of one another and we all will enjoy the view to the Canoblers. Referring to page 18 of the Blayney Shire Development Control Plan 2018 guidelines, part F72, clause number 4, states that the council may, not will or would, may require subdivision to provide an easement for future road access. This section of road will have to be cut off lot number 12. You've all got the plans there, I guess, and we are concerned as to who will be responsible for the maintenance of this area if it were to be fenced off. I believe this guideline has not been enforced for any other subdivision before, and we certainly do not want to be the first applicants to have to do this. We just want our 15-block subdivision to remain independent of any other development around us, and we do not want our road extended into the neighbour at 280 Forest Reefs Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. I think that concludes the public forum. We'll invite the Mayor to resume the chair.
Okay, thank you, councillors. We'll now move through the business this evening. Item 1, page 6, we do have a few mayoral minutes. One is the acknowledgement of the A.R. Blewett Memorial Award. At the conference, as all of you know, at the recent local government conference, Blayney Shire was very fortunate, well not fortunate, it was hard work, actually to receive the H.R. Blewett Award, which is the highest achievement for rural regional council. And really look forward to the trustees coming out on the Friday of the 8th of April to actually present the plaque and to have a day of looking around our shire and recognising the importance of this award. And even though it's awarded in 2021, it does reflect the fact that there has been many years of excellent work by staff, by councillors and by the community to get that very much deserved award from an external group of trustees, very experienced general managers and mayors. And with that comes the Blewett Scholarship, $5,000 to support ongoing professional development for staff. So I'd like to acknowledge the staff, the community and my fellow councillors for what is the most amazing achievement in local government. And also at the conference, as I'm sure you're all aware, that retired councillor David Kingham's also presented with a appreciation award for all the time that he has put into local government. Councillors, to be noted, moving through next one, item 2, page 7, while we're on the theme of awards, the 2022 IPWA Excellence Award. Again, Blayney Shire Council and our wonderful staff have won that award, which was I'll just read here, the Engineering Excellence Award for Centrepoint Sport and Leisure Centre Accessibility Upgrade and Modernisation Project in the category from 500,000 to 5 million category. Again, another wonderful achievement, something quite special to be recognised and acknowledged again, that it's a whole of organisation effort to deliver such a complicated project with the support of the staff. Councillors, moving through now to page 8, item 3, the retirement of David Hoadley. The recommendation that Council acknowledge and thank David Hoadley for his contribution to the Canobbla Zone New South Wales Fire Service. He's finally retiring as manager of the Canobbla Zone Fire Service after 21 years, and prior to that he spent 9 years as a Blayney Fire Controller. So I'd like to move that Council officially send David a letter in recognition of his service. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, now move through to page 9. Item 4, minutes of the previous council meeting held on the 21st of February 22. Can I have a mover that is a true record? Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ewan has seconded that. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, any matters arising from those minutes from the previous meeting? All happy? Very good. Move now through to page 19. Item 5, the Algwa New South Wales Conference. There's a recommendation there, councillors, that we support Councillor Price-Jones. Do we have a mover? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Somervale has seconded that. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Item 6, page 21, Tourism Development Fund applications. So Council has 3 recommendations there to support. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to these fund applications? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In particular, the National All Breeds Junior Heifer Show coming to Blayney. I believe we've potentially taken it off Dubbo, so it's a big move from the big centre of Dubbo to come to Little Blayney. So it's hopefully the start of a number of events, and I know there's another funding application later on in the business paper for further assistance for this event, but it's great to see that we're starting to attract to the big shed, which looked fantastic on the weekend at the show on Saturday, some major events. So let's hope this is the start of a number, and it's good to see that we can support in a small way in this form this event coming to Blayney Shire.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. You are indeed fortunate to have such a wonderful regional facility to be used by everybody. Councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, page 24, item 7, report of council investments as at the 28th of February. There's 2 recommendations there. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Price-Jones has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this report? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, page 29, item 8. I've declared an interest in this item. Could I ask my Deputy Mayor to take the chair for this item? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We move to item 8 on page 29. The Mayor has declared an interest and he's now left the chamber. The recommendation is that Council approve an interest-free loan to Dr Bonnie McRae pursuant to our policy in relation to doctors' incentives. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Ewan, seconded. Councillor Newstead, thank you very much. Any questions or comments in relation to this? Yes, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I have some concerns about this particular item. I've gone and read the policy, which is very, very short, so I even have an issue with our policy that it really doesn't categorise this, and I'll read part of the very short policy. And further authorise the General Manager to offer an interest-free loan, interest-free 2-year loan of up to $40,000 to assist with the securing of a new GP to practice in the Blayney Shire. Now, reading that interpretation, and the provision here is that A, the GP is already practicing in Blayney Shire, from the way I read it here and what I understand, and from the letter, that it is in the Blayney Shire practice. So it doesn't appear under the current policy that the applicant is actually eligible to apply for assistance. The next issue I have, so outside of whether they are or are not eligible, is with regard to the application, which is for a house or for funding for part of a house. With the original intent, from my understanding, and the policy was sent up, I think about a decade ago, it was more to try and attract to help with practice, to set up a practice or support a practice. And I don't, while I wasn't here on council when the original policy was sent up, I don't really see from what was written that it's actually to fund a house or part of a house, a deposit or whatever within the house. And I'm sure there are many residents throughout Blayney Shire that would love to get an interest-free loan of $40,000 for 2 years to purchase a house. We do have a housing issue or crisis at the moment. So I really have a problem in providing a house to, or providing an interest-free loan to one individual above others when the individual is already practicing within the Shire. There's also, from the way I read the application, no actual commitment as in with regard to security, and we have had issues in the past with one doctor, but also whether this house would actually be in Blayney Shire or we're just securing them. So I just think it's too loose, and I have real concerns, and I will not be supporting this recommendation tonight. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any other comments? Yes, Councillor Price-Jones.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I do also have some concerns around this. I guess my recommendation would be to defer the decision and just to that end, I guess that the letter that was the applicant is actually not written by the applicant at all. It's written by somebody else, so we don't have a lot. And the request does seem to be outside of the current policy. So I just would like to have the opportunity as a council group to look at that a little bit more closely.
You foreshadowing a motion to, an amendment to the motion to defer this to a subsequent meeting of council? I'll take that as an amendment. It has the effect of amending this. I'll take that as an amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Yes, Councillor Reynolds, thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment before I put that? There's no discussion on the amendment. I'll put the amendment proposed by Councillor Price-Jones that this matter be deferred to a subsequent meeting of council. Those in favour?
Aye.
That's carried. Thank you.
You've now got to move it as the motion.
Oh. The
amendment becomes the motion?
The amendment becomes the motion. We've just passed the amendment. It's now the motion. I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. I will invite the Mayor back into the room.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Councillors, now move through to page 31, item 9, Youth Week 2022, recommendation there of supporting some Youth Week activities. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Ewan, I believe, got in first, moved it, and Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to these recommendations? Councillor Ewan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just think it's a wonderful way for council to be able to support the youth of our Shire in this Youth Week program. We rely on our youth as our up-and-coming citizens in the Shire and the region. I think we're getting great value for money by supporting these youth groups through the high school, the Millthorpe Youth Group. Yeah, they're all very worthy groups, the dance school and the YMCA, so I'd like to think that my fellow councillors will support me in putting this recommendation forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ewan. Councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Definitely wonderful events to support. Page 33, item 10, the amendment to the investment policy. Councillors, recommendation there that the policy be amended and updated. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, questions, comments regards to this policy? Councillor Somervale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm in favour of this motion. I think will enable us to increase the funds we've got on deposit with Reliance Bank from $500,000 to $1 million. As we know, it's the only bank left in town. It's an unrated bank, and we need to amend our policy to enable us to increase the amount on deposit with Reliance Bank. There's a corresponding reduction which has been requested by T Corp to reduce the total amount invested in BBB and BBB plus investments from 30% to 25%. I don't see that as a particular problem. We've only got 15% at the moment invested in those two categories anyway. So once this policy is on exhibition and is adopted, then we won't have to wait before we implement it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Somerville. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Fully endorse Councillor Somerville's comments. It's interesting today, though, I had to look up the interest rates, and at the moment Reliance isn't offering the best interest rates, so one assumes that we still look for the best return we can for our money, so it might be a little while before we look at investing the second $500,000, or given we invest in $500,000 sums with it. But it's one positive, and I probably should have mentioned it on the previous report, that interest rates are starting to go up. We're starting to see, I think, 0.8 something of a percent we're getting for our money, which you sort of think, it's not much, but compared to the 0.45 or 0.4 that we were getting 6 months or so ago, it's actually starting to turn around for our investments, but it's still a very small contribution to the overall council operational fund, but still positive in the right way. But again, I've been a great advocate of trying to support the one remaining bank in Blayney Shire that does still have a proper branch as opposed to post office agencies of a number, and this is a good way to show our support if the opportunity arrives and if we can get the best return from Reliance Bank. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Certainly, just for people's interest, it was in response to the two major banks abandoning our community, and we are trying our very best to support the remaining bank, being Reliance Bank, at the time. So this is why this report has come to us, to give us that option, as Councillor Reynolds has said, and Councillor Somerville as well, that we are here about trying to support local businesses and organisations now that all the big banks have left us. Councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now draw your attention to page 42, item 11, minutes of the Financial Assistance Committee meeting held 3rd of March. Recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a mover for all these recommendations? Councillor Somerville has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reynolds. Any question? Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to draw your attention to an amendment to the minutes of the meeting, where there's been a typo. There was a declaration of interest by Graham Summerson in relation to his chairmanship of the Abundant Life Church and member of the Blayney Golf Club, which at the moment is recorded against David Kennedy. And both of those declarations, in fact, came from Graham Summerson. So the minutes need to be corrected. But having said that, I just, by way of overview, want to say how pleasing it was to find that we had applications which exceeded our allocation for this particular round. We had $20,000 left in the kitty for this final round this year. We had applications exceeding that, and we're in fact recommending that a total be approved of $39,000 or so, with the excess being taken from the underspend of previous years funded from the Acadia special rate variation. You'll see from the report and from the minutes that we're recommending that we scale back 3 of the applications down to the $3,000 cap per application, but we're also recommending that in 2 cases we exceed that $3,000 to enable us to complete the ceiling in the kitchen and the storeroom at the Brian Bennett Pavilion in Newbridge, and one of the biggest grants we're recommending, I think, in my time on the committee is $10,000 for the local family and history group to carry out repairs and restoration of the old Boer War Memorial, which is quite a major project and well overdue in my view. So with that, I encourage councillors to support the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Somerville, and the minutes will be amended to those changes as you've described. Councillor Goswich?
You might need the minutes from the previous meeting from the 20th July 2022 might not be amended as well. It hasn't got there yet. Section underneath, like it needs to be fixed up as well.
Yep. Noted. Thank you, Councillor Goswich. Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Somerville. Certainly the restoration, the upgrade of the Boer War Memorial, I think very appropriate project for the committee to support. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and fully endorse your comments and Councillor Somerville's with regard to the Boer War Memorial, and hopefully Council can support and help with that restoration, and hopefully maybe also the RSL. I think it's now the Orange sub-branch of the RSL that looks after that area with the merger with Blayney. But I did want to quickly mention a couple of other projects, particularly the showground, and to acknowledge a fantastic show on Saturday, Mr Mayor. Hopefully they got close to a record crowd, but parking was certainly a challenge at the showground. And in talking with the Treasurer, who was inquiring whether they were successful, they'd been successful with some state government money, and I said that the recommendation was in the minutes to actually do some work. I think they wanted to do some work on some fencing, so to further enhance what is already a fantastic showground. So if this recommendation is approved tonight, that will be supported. And just a note with regard to two other applications, one being NAIDOC Week, there is a recommendation later in the report, and also the Country Education Foundation, a report later in this report, these recommendations with regard to funding for those two, which again the committee considered both to be very good projects, but fell outside the scope of the current terms of reference for the committee. So something we can discuss as we move through this business paper, but a lot of projects. And one final one that I just wanted to mention was Newbridge. I did have a look recently at the Brian Bennett Pavilion, which is fantastic, and it'll be great to finish particularly the kitchen so flies and other pests can't get into the kitchen area, so food preparation can be done without having an open ceiling. So again, a grant recommendation here of I think it's $5,000 for the kitchen and a storeroom to seal that roof. So I also commend the recommendation to my fellow councillors. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to financial assistance? Grants Committee's recommendations, all very good. They do great work, that committee, and make sure the money gets distributed where it's needed through our community. Okay, no other questions or comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 48, item 12. Appointment of the independent member for Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. Recommendation there. Councillors, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Somerville has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In looking at the selection criteria, a good choice, the individual. And with my Upper Macquarie County Council hat, also looking forward, I'm the representative from Upper Macquarie County Council on the ARIC, looking forward to, Upper Macquarie is looking forward to being part of the process, as well as Central Tablelands, Water and Blayney Council. So look forward to the start of the new ARIC with the new member and an existing member. So fully support the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. A very important committee for Council, the Audit and Risk. Any other questions or comments, councillors? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Page 50, item 13, Country Education Foundation there. We don't have a recommendation there, councillors. It's for councillor consideration. So, councillors, I'm in your hands about the opportunity to support what I think is a wonderful foundation of $3,000. As we've previously just heard, that it was outside the scope of a financial assistance committee, and that is why it's been referred to full council for consideration. Councillor Reynolds.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move a recommendation to support and provide the $3,000 sought and that money to come from the Community Financial Assistance Program, which is one of the potential funding options from Council. There is still surplus funds in that program, and so I'm happy to move that recommendation if there's a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. We're just having it up there on the screen. The council support the request from Country Education Foundation. Support the request. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with Councillor Reynolds. I support the recommendation to make a grant of $3,000. It's not part of the resolution, at least not on the board at the moment, as to where the funding will come from. Councillor Reynolds has suggested that it come from the Community Financial Assistance Program. My view would be that this is very similar to the 10 for 10 leadership program, which also fell outside the ambit of the financial assistance policy, and it came separately to council, and council separately agreed to fund that. The main comment in relation to the source of the funds is whatever source of funding we use for the 10 for 10 program, we should use for this one, because I can't see any material difference between the two.
Okay, thank you, councillors. We're just having a bit of a discussion.
It may well be that we can leave the source of funding to the QBRS and we can sort that out then.
I think
it's not part of the resolution at the moment anyway.
No, it's not. Councillor Reynolds, would you be happy to defer this into the QBRS?
I'm happy to support and then defer where the funding comes from. So yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Councillors, we have a mover in Councillor Reynolds. We have a seconder in Councillor Somerville. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, move through now to page 52. Item 14, the additional special variations. Recommendations there 1 to 2. We do have a slight amendment to the wording. I draw your attention to the third sentence on the first recommendation, and we're going to remove the word temporary and insert the word permanent as per the recommendation from the Office of Local Government, just for your information. Okay, so we have the recommendations there, 1 and 2. Councillors, do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Price-Jones has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments on this? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In looking at inflation at the moment, the original proposal from IPART for this council of a 0.7% increase in rates would have seen us have to reduce some of the programs or go into deficit further. This gives us at least some ability, particularly to cover the cost of wages, which if you look at what's been awarded, plus a movement, you're looking at probably around about a 3% move in the wage costs of this council in the next 12 months, financial year-wise. If you look at inflation and some of the products we use, like I just drove past one of the service stations in town to come here, and diesel's $2 a litre at the moment. And when we would have done forward planning, I'm sure we probably would have worked a diesel price at probably about $1.50 a litre. So, there's been a third of a 33% increase roughly on what the budget would have been. There's a heap of other line items, particularly steel, that's just gone through the roof. Timber prices have gone up. So to even just stay as status quo, we'll still probably go backwards, but at least we are trying to keep a reasonable pace so we can at least do most of the projects, if not all the projects that we have planned for the next financial year. So fully support the increase of 2.5%, or the proposed increase that we'll take back to IPART, and hopefully that it'll cover a lot of our increase in costs, but I don't suspect it will cover the full increase going on, the potential inflation rate of maybe 4 to 5%. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following Councillor Reynolds as usual. Yes, I support this application. I think our position falls pretty well squarely within the fast track rules for this special rate variation. I certainly am very pleased to see that the recommendation has been amended from a temporary SRV to a permanent one, because what we need to do here is put ourselves in the position we would have been in had we had the 2.5% rate cap, which not only we were budgeting for, but pretty well all councils in the state were budgeting for, and it would simply mean that we are back in the position we would have been in had a sort of a sensible, realistic variation come out of rate cap come out of IPART. So yes, I certainly support it being permanent. And just in terms of the numbers, with 0.7%, it gives council only 65,000 extra income every year. With 2.5%, it gives us an extra 167,000 up to 232,000. So it's quite a significant difference, but it only puts us in the position we would have been in, and it enables us to continue to deliver on our long-term financial plan as we've adopted it at the moment, which should satisfy our part as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Somerville. I think it's very clear, and we're fortunate that the new Minister has recognised that the IPART assessment this year, so every year IPART dictate to councils how much they can increase their rates by. It was acknowledged, I believe, by the Minister that it was flawed. This year it was flawed. As a result, they've given us the opportunity through this mechanism, and all councils, I believe, across New South Wales are going to take up this variation to actually apply and ask for and levy the rate that they had all put in their long-term financial plan to make sure that they are all sustainable. So I'm very thankful that the Minister has allowed us to do this, and I'm very supportive as well of this recommendation. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Councillor Ewan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I totally agree with yourself and Councillor Somerville and Councillor Reynolds, and I'm sure my fellow councillors that haven't spoken also agree. This is the right thing to do by our ratepayers. At the end of the day, we are here to at least maintain the services we deliver to our ratepayers currently, and we need to do that in the future, because I believe they don't expect anything less than what we're doing presently. And along with being able to carry out some of our projects throughout the Shire, this will assist and hold us at where we are. In the past, as mentioned, we've always received that rate peg around that 2.5, 2.7. So yeah, 0.7 is very remiss, I think, of rate peg in offering that to us. So I totally agree that and see why all councils through New South Wales would be joining forces with us to do that. So yes, I fully support the recommendation, and yeah, I think it's the right thing to do as a council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Councillors, any other questions or comments on this item? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to item 58. Item 15, lease of industrial land for adjustment purposes. The recommendation there, councillors, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Seconder anywhere in the room? Councillor Ewan. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this recommendation around lease of land? If not, I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Page 60, item 16, NAIDOC Week School Initiative. Recommendation there, councillors. Have a mover for this recommendation. Councillor Reynolds has moved that way, and I think Councillor Newstead was seconded, I believe. Councillor Reynolds.
Mr Mayor, I'll leave it similar to the Country Education Foundation, that will make the decision in the QBRS. We'll find the funds from either the community grants or from general reserves. Leave it at that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Seems like a reasonable position to consider. If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, page 62, item 17, Director of Infrastructure Services Monthly Report. There's a recommendation there, councillors, this report to be received and noted. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich. Councillors, I'm sure there is. Questions or comments to our Director in regards to his Infrastructure Monthly Report, which is always the highlight of the meeting. Councillor Newstead.
I'll get in before Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Somerville. Just with the bulk streetlight replacement, is there any indication when they'd be coming back, or Essential Energy will be replacing the ones that haven't been done? Because there are still quite a few around that don't look to have been replaced yet.
Through you, Mr Mayor, my understanding is that those incomplete components are those bits that couldn't be undertaken by the contractor because of vegetation trimming required, or they were a specialist fitting or so forth. I can't give you any specific date, but I'm happy to follow up and provide you with further advice.
Just another quick question.
Councillor Newstead.
The KGO change rooms, how are they going? They're back on track, or are they?
Mr Mayor, the project's certainly progressing well now, but we wouldn't have had the ability to make up the delay.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillor Reynolds, you have a question for the Director?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Some questions and a couple of comments. Firstly, with regard to place design and Millthorpe, just seeking clarity on the Millthorpe Village Centre Master Plan. Will it go back to the whole community or to the village committee, or it says that there's going to be feedback sought before it comes back to council, as in what sort of process is going to be undertaken through you, Mr Mayor?
No.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the intent is to go back to the village committee initially. Subject to how that comes out, we could certainly go to the community.
Councillor Reynolds?
Next question, Mr
Next
Mayor,
question.
with regard to storm damage, and particularly the Gap Road, I was approached at the show on the weekend with regard to a landholder who's had a lot of logs lodged, etc. So the landholder was wondering where the application was up to. I don't think they've put any application in themselves, but the council application, and whether it is a broader community application or just the council is applying with regard to the damage on Gap Road. So I'd said I'd come back to that landholder. So through you, Mr Mayor, to the Director.
Through Mr Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the disaster declaration, whilst I'm not sure if one has been declared for that particular event yet, I'll have to find out. Once it's declared, it means that the other funding opportunities, if you like, are made available to the public. They don't have to, those programs become available to them.
You, Director. Next question, Mr Mayor, which was the streetlight one, but there's a substantial, as in substantial savings already for 1 month. So it's really showing, and as Councillor Newstead said, we still haven't installed all of them. So, yeah, and an environmental saving as well as a financial saving in the amount of carbon dioxide being emitted is substantially reduced in reducing our kilowattage usage. The next question, Mr Mayor, or actually a comment with regard to Penuara Road. I was on it yesterday and the second stage has been sealed, so must have been done on Friday or Saturday, which is fantastic. So 2 of the 3 stages are now sealed. With regard to heavy patching for Hobbies Yards Road, are we aiming on what we've done already in the stabilisation? Are we looking at doing more heavy patching on Hobbies Yards Road on what we've just done, or is that pretty well the end of the heavy patching at this stage on Hobbies Yards Road?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I have to take that on notice.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds.
Next question, Mr Mayor, and it's a very comprehensive report, may I say, and thank the Director for such a comprehensive report. With regard to footpaths, it says that the footpath program has been completed for this financial year, so I'm just wondering what the footpath team is going to be doing for the next few months. Are they doing other concrete work, or what's the situation with the concrete team?
Mr Mayor, they'll be fully engaged with either other concrete works or other road type projects.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and 2 congratulations. Firstly, again from the showground, and I mentioned it earlier, but the presentation on Saturday was fantastic. The showground just looked $1 million, so I'd like to pass on to the staff, the ground, parks and garden staff, and those staff involved in preparing the showground, a big congratulations, because it just was fantastic. So well done to all of our staff. And also with regard to Redmond Oval, was there with the Acting Premier Paul Toole and yourself, Mr Mayor, and also Councillor Price-Jones on Saturday. And again, the skate park looking really, really good. A fantastic outcome for the Millthorpe community with regard to that skate park. And I think that's it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments for the Director's report? Councillor Ewan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a quick comment to our Director Grant in regard to the Gap Road and Yarrambang Road intersection. Nice to see that you've had a meeting with the wind farm in regard to the scale of works required there at that intersection before they commence their project. So yeah, that looks like it's good to see you've been proactive and moved forward and not waiting for the disaster storm funding to come through to actually put that in action and possibly get the road commenced and back in action sooner than later. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Before I put the motion? I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. I'd just like to again acknowledge our special guests from the Orange Venturers, and I hope they're enjoying the variety of issues that local government covers, because certainly this meeting we are certainly going around a lot of issues. Okay, moving right along to our next item, page 67. Item 18, Central West Council's Environment and Waterways Alliance recommendation there. Councillors, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Newstead, thank you, has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Ewan. Councillors, any questions or comments? If not,
Mr Mayor, I think it's great to continue the support with the Central West Council's Environment and Waterways Alliance. As myself and Councillor Somerville sit on CTW, water's a big part of the Blayney Shire and our region. And regionally, I think we as a council water and waterways in our region and shires. So it's great to continue that support.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. We have been a long supporter of this for sure. Okay, councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Item 19, Pesticide Notification Plan, page 69. Recommendation there, councillors, the plan be put on public exhibition. Do I have a mover? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Councillor Price-Jones has seconded the recommendation. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this plan? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. One area that I note's lacking at the moment, and Councillor does commission Upper Macquarie County Council to do some weeds work. So while it's out on public exhibition, could I suggest that Council talk with Upper Macquarie to actually look at, I do note that it mentions roads and it mentions lanes, but possibly a few extra modifications or additions in the plan to include roadside agricultural spraying, as we heard a speaker earlier tonight talking about the importance of it, but there's no real mention of it in the plan at this point in time. So before it comes back to Council, I hope that we can sort of just add an extra couple of lines. It probably doesn't need a huge amount, and happy to also provide some comments, so talk offline with maybe the director or the staff member involved with the review about a couple of other things that maybe could be included within the report, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to the recommendation? We have a mover. We have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now draw your attention to page 86, item 20, Blayney Main Street Master Plan. Apologies. Recommendations there 1 and 2. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Ross Jones has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ewan. Councillors, any questions or comments? This goes off to public exhibition again. Very good. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll try and be brief, as in some great concepts that I think have come out of community consultation, come out of council and will come out to the public. So I strongly encourage the community now, if they don't like something or something concerns them, to come forward and outline it before we make a final decision, a final determination. But I think in looking at the plans, and particularly the railway precinct, I think it's come up with quite a good concept, quite a good idea to try and improve traffic flow, to get rid of those 2 intersections or 2 areas where traffic will come out and bring them down to 1, improve car parking, and improve the amenity of that area. So I think that part of the Shire, so in Blayney near the railway line and the train station, I think is a major move forward to beautify and to also enhance traffic movement. So that's one observation. One concern that I potentially have is the tightening of Church and Adelaide Street on what's potentially proposed here. And again, we'll wait to hear back from the community, but it may actually increase the backlog of traffic because it's really removing, from my observations here, a left-hand turn lane at all, which may increase frustration and push traffic back up to the fire station on a more regular basis. So that's probably the only downside. I do like sort of bringing in Adelaide Street some of the pedestrian access areas to cross the street. I think is also a major move forward. So pedestrian safety, and it's not proposed as pedestrian crossings, but also to narrow the road will hopefully make pedestrian safety a lot better, as well as I think there's at least 1 more accessible car park from my memory on either side is being proposed of Adelaide Street between Church and Ogilvie. So yeah, a good plan to put out. Hopefully the community will now engage if they do have issues and come back to council with any issues before we as councillors make a final determination, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Newstead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to echo Councillor Reynolds' concerns about the intersection out here. I looked at exactly the same thing when I looked at the plan. I thought, gosh, if you can't turn left while other cars are waiting for the traffic coming down Adelaide Street, there's going to be a backlog there. So I think that's maybe something we do need to look at, because it could be a bottleneck. So thank
you, Councillor Newstead. Good point. I guess the important takeaway tonight is that this will go on public exhibition for 28 days. This is a long-term vision of our main street. There is no funding for anything at this point in time. But it's important that we do engage the community, and again, I'll repeat the comments of Councillor Reynolds. We do encourage community members, and you don't have to live in Blayney, to actually provide some feedback to this plan, because once we endorse it, if it gets endorsed, it'll be here for a long time, and it'll then be the subject of future funding applications for years to come. Councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 94, item 21. The revised recycled water policy, recommendation there. Policy goes on public exhibition. Councillors, thank you. Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich. Councillors, any questions or comments? We'll put it on public exhibition and see how we go. No questions or comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now to page 100, item 22, the draft Central Western Orana Regional Plan 2041. There's a recommendation there. Let's note it. Do we have a mover? Councillor Reynolds, thank you. Do we have a seconder anywhere in the room? Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Questions or comments? I think it's pretty straightforward. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Now through to page 107, item 23, Centrepoint Management Agreement Extension. Recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Councillors, do I have a mover for these three recommendations? Councillor Newstead, thank you, and Councillor Ewan has seconded. Councillors, any questions, comments? Councillor Newstead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is a good thing. The YMCA haven't had a real good run at it with all the things that have happened over the last few years, so I think it would only be fair for them to try and get at least 12 months so we can see what kind of figures they are actually returning. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Absolutely, Councillor Newstead, I couldn't agree more. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Somervale.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think we're fortunate that the Local Government Act allows us to do what we want to do here without going out to the market because of extenuating circumstances. It's a very, very sensible way to proceed, as Councillor Newstead says, and not only is it sensible, but it's actually supported by the legislation. And I think it's a good outcome if we were to extend this for 2 years.
And I would suggest be strongly supported by the community. Certainly the feedback that I received at the YMCA are doing a wonderful job, be it under very difficult circumstances, as Councillor Newstead has alluded to. Okay, councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now move through to item 24. I've declared an interest. I'll now invite the Deputy Mayor to come and chair this item. Thank you.
Well, councillors, we move to item 24 on page 112. The Mayor has declared an interest in this item and has left the chamber. This is the item on which we had a public forum earlier in this meeting in relation to recommendation. But the recommendation is before you. Is someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Ewan? Is it seconded? Councillor Reynolds, thank you. Comments and questions? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor. I do have some questions to the Director that I'd like answered, and some of it has flown from the comments from the proponent. Firstly, with regard to the road reserve between blocks 8 and 12, I'd like a little bit more of an indication from the director of which block it would go on, or is it going to go on both blocks? And then who potentially would be responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance, or how that potentially may work?
Mr. Director.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Reynolds, so condition 2 simply asks for an amended plan, basically to the Department of Planning and Environmental Services satisfaction. I imagine, without preempting that, it would be gun barrel straight, probably across lots 8 and 12, and they would have to be slightly rejigged just to ensure 2 hectares. The second part of the question is, there is no requirement or expectation at this point in time for that road to be constructed over lots 8 or 12 to the neighbouring block to the west, nor is there any specific requirement for that road reserve to be fenced out. So it could likely be included in either of all of those blocks. We simply want the reserve on the paper for a future connection.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Another question.
So do, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I've got several. Just clarifying my own mind with regard to that, the likely outcome is that one of the 2 blocks would have the road reserve, it wouldn't go down the middle of the roadway, and both blocks would have road reserve, so there would be a boundary fence on the potential road reserve on one side, but not on the other at this stage, and that would be totally within the other block, or am I understanding correctly there, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, so proposed lots 8 and 12 would have to be rejigged. That red boundary line between them may not be the boundary line. It will depend upon where that road reserve location is. We're not just going to skew a road off as is. We would look the best outcome, most likely going to be gun barrel straight. So there has to, and that's why condition 2 asks for an amended plan.
But the amended plan, through you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, would not come back to council, or just come back to the staff with a...
Mr. Deputy Mayor, correct. So it would be basically the slight amendment would be considered under delegation, yeah.
The reason, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that I ask this question is then who potentially would be responsible for the fencing if this road reserve was ever enacted and connected with the lot to the west? Would it be the owner of the property if one of the sides was the actual boundary of the road reserve and the other property had the whole of the road reserve plus their property? Would it be the owner of that lot, or would it be council, or would it be the proponent who would potentially have to fence off that road reserve?
Question, and just to clarify that, we're talking about fencing it off if it were ever constructed.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Director.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, it would be my expectation that it would be any future developer or with the benefit of development consent to that block to the west that would have to fence that property or that road reserve.
Through you again, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So is that able to be noted anywhere, that as in that would be the responsibility, so the potential owner doesn't get a rude shock down the track and council doesn't have any record of that? Is that possible to be noted in any way?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would not recommend that, because essentially once this subdivision is done and signed off, that's it. Unless we're going to put it on the title, which I think's extremely onerous for maximum 145 metres. I think it'd be a bridge that we'd have to cross down the track. Worst case scenario, council may have to do it, but I doubt that.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So again, the potential purchaser of the land, and it may not be notified, but as in, would they be notified so that they don't plant any trees? So if there is a block with this potential road reserve on it, so that we don't have any issues down the track, should there be something on the title to say, don't plant any trees, you know, with the 20-metre distance from your boundary fence, and don't put any other structures or anything on that? So maybe staff potentially could see, so that we don't have problems down the track if this road reserve was ever enacted, that all of a sudden we've got 20 big eucalypts, because it might be 20 years down the track, who knows, planted across the potential council road reserve.
Maybe I could make a comment there. The way I see it is that if this is approved with the road reserve as part of either or both of those lots, when the plan of subdivision is finally registered and separate titles are issued, that the affected title or titles will have noted on them the road reserve, so that the purchaser of one or both of those lots, when they search the title they're about to buy, it would be very clear to them that there's a road reserve running along one of the boundaries. I mean, it wouldn't stop them planting trees, but they do at their own risk.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. The next question, and it was brought up by the proponent this evening, is with regard to lot, I think it's 160, which is off Showground Road, so Willawarra, which is roughly the same size as the other block that we're potentially looking at having a road reserve to. So through you to either the Director of Planning or the Director of Infrastructure, why has Council only gone that route and not the other route to link in with Showground Road?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So we sat down internally and looked at this matter, particularly this clause of the DCP, F2 or 7.2 and 7.3. There is no approved subdivision on that northern part, nor is to the west of this block, but there's a large drainage depression to the north of this property, to the south of the other property. There was no viable link. There was no point in forcing the provision through there when it was never going to happen. I think this western link, it could happen with benefits. There's no benefit in simply pushing one through to the north. It would connect through Showground Lane if an application ever came in.
Leads to a follow-on question, Mr Deputy Mayor, probably to the Director of Infrastructure. Quite recently I won't say it was a near miss, but I had to slow down substantially with a bus coming out of Showground Lane or road, whatever it's called, and turning right onto Forest Reefs Road to go towards Cadia. The current site and visual aspects of that Showground Road are quite poor, looking to the southwest, I suppose you'd say, or south-southwest. So I'm just wondering, with the reconstruction of the Forest Reefs Road in the next 12 or so months, whether that intersection will be improved, particularly as if Warrawilla is ever developed, and it is owned by someone that is doing some developments at the moment, that intersection would be safe enough to allow a reasonable amount of traffic to come out and have a reasonable, as in the correct line of sight, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 50 metres or 100 metres in either direction? So through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, to the Director.
Thank you. Mr Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, lines of sight are determined by a number of factors. So without having all those factors, I couldn't tell you what the minimum for those site distances. Your observation that a school bus has come out of that intersection?
It was a mine bus. It was in a mine minibus, but...
A mine minibus?
Yes.
Right, okay. I was a bit worried that suddenly there's a school
no
bus
school
route
bus.
we didn't know about. I'd have to take it on notice to look at what the design's like with regards to the intersection. I'm just can't recall that.
Because going through you again, Mr Deputy Mayor, it does concern me if we put a lot of extra traffic coming out Showground Road, that it could actually be creating more traffic issues, and maybe there's a better option if we are moving to actually put a road from the current proposal across, even though it would cost a fair bit to get across this culvert, would possibly make it a lot safer for the community if, and again, I have no idea from at the moment what the proposal is with regard to improving safety from Showground Road, but at the moment it is reasonably unsafe. Thank you, Mr Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any... Yes, Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. Just through you, I'm a little bit confused. Looking at the plan, you've got the proposed road which ends in a cul-de-sac. The plan, if it's approved, is to put a a road further through, so that doesn't have to be done now when this road that's on there now is formed and sealed and whatever. It's just a bit hard, like I don't like usually voting against the recommendations, but I just don't know why, if it's only a maybe or that they, if it was that they have to, I could understand it, if you're following what I'm saying. So when would that bit of road be formed? When would it become a road? While they're doing the rest of the road, or?
My understanding, and the director will be able to clarify this, but my understanding is that the cul-de-sac will be constructed as it's on the plans. The road reserve we're talking about now to give access to the adjoining property, if and whenever it's developed, will not be made. So on the looking at the subdivision and looking at the landforms there'll be no evidence that there's intended to be a road constructed through there. It'll just be like a crown road that's never been constructed. It'll just be a road on a map, available to be developed if and when the adjoining property is developed and they want access through this block.
So what about though if the blocks 8 and 12, just sort of looking at where the entrance to them would be off the edge of that cul-de-sac? Yeah, it's a little bit, I don't know. I'm a bit confused by it all, to be quite honest. Who would then pay for that extra road to be developed through? Would it be the applicants now? No?
Mr. Director.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So all we are seeking is, what would be built is as proposed by the applicants. All we are seeking then is a 20 metre wide reserve to the neighbouring property, so that if an application comes in, we could actually require connection in through that. It may be a loop road, it may be a connection just to that north, we don't know, but this is the ideal time to secure that, an option down the track. There's no requirement on these applicants to construct the road or anything like that. That western neighbour would have to do that if we required it or they proposed it.
So again, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So that 20 metres, I know it's only say 10 metres off each block. How are the applicants now compensated for that loss of land that then becomes a road reserve? Or are they not?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, they're not. This is part of the development. See, that provision is built in the development control plan to look over property boundaries to get best planning outcomes that haven't occurred on the other side of the road. And there haven't been other applications where we haven't applied this recently. Mayville's the end of this zoning. This is the real first opportunity to do it, to try and get better outcomes. You look at the south of that road, there's a number of driveways now that literally access off in a short period of space, and it's not a good outcome. So we're trying to seek better outcomes long term. It could be next year, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, but at least we've got the option. This is the time to do it.
I noticed in the public forum that the applicant said that they didn't want to be the first. Well, sometimes they've always got to be a first person, so we'll see how this goes anyway.
I'll see if there's any other councillors who want to make a comment before I'll come back to you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Ewan.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to our Director, Mark. I guess it's hypothetical, but the development which may or may not occur for a subdivision on the west of the applicant's land, several years ago the council actually put a driveway in because we realigned the road there on the bend where and moved their actual entranceway further down the hill towards Cowrie Creek. That road, obviously, that we put in there was only for a private road and serves that as such. Hypothetically, should the applicant on the western side of the DA, the Victoria, decide to do a subdivision, maybe, I'm not sure quite of the size of the actual land, but it could be anything up to, I guess, 10 to 15 blocks, maybe. Would it be unrealistic to think that should that happen, say, in the next 10 years, that we wouldn't actually give that applicant access to Forest Reefs Road for their development, and the closed road that we're speaking about tonight would be, if that was put into play through the the development on the west, that closed road, if that became to be, would we see that more so as a planning proposal for a through road for the two developments over, say, if that did happen in the next 10 years? Or would you consider that maybe we'd be looking at this closed road, should the applicant on the west go ahead and do anything, using the closed road as their only access to their development? As you said, there's several roads on the southern side, gateway entrances, should I say, on the southern side of Forest Reefs Road. There's an existing one there, obviously now, for the owner on the western side of this proposed development. That will still exist, obviously, should they do a subdivision of any great size. So wouldn't it be realistic to think that we would upgrade that existing road, or ask the developer to upgrade that existing road to give access to maybe those proposed blocks, should that ever happen in the next 10 years? It's in a 1C area. They're quite able to do a development on that western property. So are you considering that the closed road that we're proposing would be more so a through road should there another development happen on the west, or would you consider that on the day that may be the only access to a western development?
I think just to clarify the question, I think the question is, if 280 Forest Reefs Road were developed, subdivided into rural residential blocks, would the access to those blocks be both from a new entrance on Forest Reefs Road as well as the closed road we're talking about, or would it be only one or the other?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, we can't really answer that question. It's a 23 hectare lot, I think, to the west, so that's potentially 11 lots. Until we see that configuration, it is quite constrained. You've got the creek on the furthest west, you've got steep slope through there. Until we see a lot layout, we won't know. I can't answer that question, but we want the option.
So if the developer's all complying, and council through the planning department chose to use that closed road as an access, that then wouldn't unless there were submissions objecting against that wouldn't come back to council for approval for that closed road to be open. That would be done as a delegation of council. Is that correct or not?
For you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's not a closed road as such. It's a parcel there that, it'd be sit on as a road reserve essentially, until we would do pre-DA advice, advising an applicant like we do in most subdivisions. This is the desired outcome, based on their preliminary stuff, and then we notify that if required, and then we proceed through our normal delegations process. It may not end up in the chamber. It depends on the process.
Yeah. And another final question from me in regard to the neighbour to the north, Willawarra. I believe it is now a closed road, was closed land, which runs down the boundary of the applicant on the north of their property, runs down the northern boundary. Should they decide to do a subdivision development, that now being a closed road would not now able to be reverted back to a road reserve to come in and become access to the road reserve which we're planning on creating tonight?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I believe that's now a freehold parcel of land, so it's like any other normal lot.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Any more questions on this side of the chamber? No? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I forgot to ask one question earlier. With regard to Lot 13, which is along Forest Reefs Road, a little confused with the recommendations with regard to access, so just after some clarification, whether access to Lot 13 is off the proposed road or off Forest Reefs Road.
Mr Deputy Mayor, it is off the proposed new road through I think it's a 6 metre wide handle between lots 11 and 12. So there's no new accesses to Forest Reefs Road from this subdivision.
Clarified, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It was just a little bit shady on
Yes.
whether there was one or two lots that had laneway access or driveway access to those lots through running up alongside someone else's property. So that does clarify it.
Thank you. Well, if there's no more questions, just to clarify it, the recommendation which has been moved and seconded is as per the business paper. We'll put that now. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3. We'll call for a division. I'm in favour. So I think we'll call for a division. I think it's unanimous. I think all councillors. All councillors voted in favour of the recommendation. Thank you, councillors. Thanks for all your questions. It's an unusual one, and I'm glad we've clarified a lot of issues on the way through. There's a bit of work to be done yet to put this into practice. So thanks for that, councillors. We'll now move on to the next item and invite the Mayor back into the room. Okay. Yeah.
Struggling to get my head around it, and it was actually I was really into all the various things that are going through.
Okay, councillors, thank you, Deputy Mayor. We do have 4 matters to consider. Oh, sorry. I've got 148, going to 148. Hey, councillors, page 148, report of the Central New South Wales Joint Organisation meeting held 24th of February 22. Recommendation there that council note the report. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Reynolds, thank you. Let's move that way. Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments on this report? If not, as we see, we've got a new chair, which is great. The Mayor of Carbine will do a wonderful, wonderful job, and so will Mark from Oberon. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, we do have 4 matters to deal with in closed committee. So in accordance with the Local Government Act 93 and the Local Government General Regulation 2005, in the opinion of the General Manager, the following business is of a kind as referred to in section 10.2 of the Act and should be dealt with in a part of the meeting closed to the media and public. Item 26, electricity procurement, Central New South Wales Joint Organisation. Item 27, legal matter. Item 28, land acquisition for road realignment at 143 Forest Reefs Road, DP 1280817. Item 29, land acquisition for road realignment at 133 and 150 Carbine Road. Can I move that we go into closed committee? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich, I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? Declared carried. We'll now go into closed committee. Okay, thank you, councillors. We're now back into open council, and I think of this meeting. Now the decisions have been made, I will read them out to 5. Electricity procurement. Recommendation that council advise the Central New South Wales Joint Organisation that council's decision and terms of contract will be subject to further review given current investigations into the Blayney. Resolve that because of the extenuating circumstances set out in the report of electricity for large market sites, street lighting, which are due to commence 1st of January 2023. 3. Note that the reasons for this decision are as follows. A. The services with respect to which the tender relates can only be provided by energy retailers. B. Council has received expert advice that due to the nature of the response to the request for tender will only be open for acceptance for a period of 1 to 2 weeks. C. Even if the tender period was shortened to 7 days as permitted under the regulations, some, if not all, of the relevant tenders would expire prior to council being able to undertake an assessment of the tenders. Report the meeting to council and resolve to accept or reject any tenders. D. This will result in council either having no valid tenders which it is able to accept, or it would not be able to consider for acceptance all of the tenders lodged in response to the request for a tender. E. This would not be a satisfactory result for council. And 4. Delegate the authority to execute the contracts for the supply of electricity for large market sites and street lighting to the General Manager. I hope I got that right, councillors. Hope you were paying attention while I read that out. Okay. Item 27, the legal matter. Councillors, the recommendation was that the council receive and note the report. And item 28, land acquisition for road realignment at 143 Forest Reefs Road, DP 1280817. Recommendation that council approve the compulsory acquisition of lot 2 in DP 1280817, registered 18th of the 1st 2022. 2. The making of an application to the Minister for Local Government and the Governor for the approval of such compulsory acquisition. And 3. Upon acquisition, the land be classified as operational land under Section 31 of the Local Government Act 93. And 4. The replacement of council seal, or the placement of council seal on all documentation associated with the compulsory acquisition for the realignment of Forest Reefs Road, including on any deed of agreement for compulsory acquisition pursuant to Section 30 of the Land Acquisition Just Terms Compensation Act 1991. And finally, councillors, item 29, land acquisition for road realignment at 133 and 150 Carbine Road, DP 1281949. The council approved the compulsory acquisition of lots 1 and 2 in DP 1281949, registered 21st of March 2022. And 2, the making of an application to the Minister for Local Government and Governor for approval of such compulsory acquisition. And 3, upon acquisition, the land be classified as operational land under Section 31 of the Local Government Act 93. And 4, the placement of council seal on all documentation associated with the compulsory acquisition for the realignment of Carbine Road, including on any deed of agreement for compulsory acquisition pursuant to Section 30 of the Land Acquisition Just Terms Compensation Act 1991. Thank you, councillors. That concludes our meeting this evening. I thank you all for your attendance, and I officially declare the meeting closed.